easily. You're going to call unemployment, insecurity, corruption, lack of good economic policies, and it continues. Poverty, it's endless. But what I want to point out about Africa is a root cause that makes all of these problems continue to foster. And one of those root causes is that we don't have the best ways of keeping good records. We don't have the best ways of keeping good records. Is that true? Is that true or false? It's true. You could have a piece of land. It's allocated to Mr. Muhammad. But all of a sudden, Mr. Ibrahim, Mr. Abdul Malik, Mrs. Fatima, they all have CFOs for that same land, that same piece of land. We have those kind of cases, right? Easily, identity. Recently we had this NIN SIM linkage, right? You had to go and submit your biometrics. You submitted your biometrics at INEC, you submitted them to NIBS, your BVN, and then all the time it's always been required. But if it was stored properly from the get-go, we wouldn't have to collect it over and over again, right? Is that true? So likewise, if you take a lot of the sectors, if you take healthcare for example, you register under NHIS, and then you go to the hospital to render service to you, and the hospital tells you, the health management organization hasn't paid. They haven't paid the hospital. You go to the HMO says they've paid the hospital. NHIS says they've paid the HMO, and everybody blames each other because you don't have a way or a solid way of keeping good records that will empower the citizen. So there are lots of middlemen that bring issues to all of these processes. Just a second. Okay. Sorry about that. So I just wanted to start off with highlighting some of the problems that we face. And a lot of these problems stem from the lack of keeping good records. So now, alhamdulillah, the 21st century brings a solution to this problem that would inshallah solve so many other problems of ours. And this solution is called blockchain. Blockchain, it's basically the composition of two words. There's a word block and the word chain. What is blockchain? First thing I'm going to tell you is it's barakah. Keep that at the back of your mind. Blockchain is barakah. Why is it barakah? Or how is it barakah? Inshallah, we're going to get to that. So, blockchain, to begin with, is just a chain of blocks. Blockchain, just do the reverse of the words, a chain of blocks. You've got a number of blocks that are connected to each other, and then you form a chain. So, it's a special kind of database. We know what a database is. You don't know what a database is? When you come to ICIC Academy, you've got records of all of these students, right? This person, Muhammad Umar, is in primary 1. This is his date of birth, this is his parents' phone number, this is where he comes from, which state he comes from, and then you have all of these records for all of these students. This is the class he's in. This is basically a database. A database can be in the format of a physical document. You've got all of these files when you go to government agencies. But the database has also taken the format of an electronic database. You can have so many systems. You go to Google and do a quick search, and then immediately you've got all of these responses from several different places. It's picking that up from several different databases and showing it to you. So databases are prone to several problems. So the reason why I say blockchain is a special kind of database is basically, rather than simply storing Muhammad Umar, ICIC Academy student, primary one, comes from Kaduna State, and then you've got his parents' phone number, his address, and so on. Think of all of this data of Muhammad Umar in a block. So that block has got three things, yeah? The block has got three things. The first thing, or the first attribute, is the data set. So the data, Muhammad Umar, and all of the other details about them. That's the first thing that is contained in that block. The second thing that is contained in that block is an identifier. Let's just call it an identifier. I know there may be technical people who are familiar with blockchain or these technologies, so I just want to use the most simple terms so that everybody can understand. So after the data, the second thing you have is an identifier, and that identifier is unique to that data. So the data goes hand in hand with the identifier. The identifier changes, the data has to change. So it's tied, basically. And then the third thing that you have, and this is where I need everybody to really pay attention. This is the juice. The third thing is another identifier of a previous block. Remember, all of these things are in one block, right? So you've got the data, an identifier of that data, and then you've got the identifier of the previous block. So imagine three blocks, block A, B, C. So in block C, you have data, you have ID of block C, and you have the ID of block B, right? On block B, you have data of block B, identifier of block B, and then you've got identifier of block A. Likewise, on block A, you have data, you have an identifier for block A, and then since that's the first block, you would assume that the identifier of the previous block is null. So, do you see that the identifier of the previous blocks, of the previous block in each of the blocks, connects all of them, right? It connects all of them. So that's the first thing that you should know about blockchain. It's a special kind of database, and that is how it's really interconnected. So the second thing about blockchain, inshallah, I'm not going to bore you guys. I'm just going to mention three things. There's a second, and then we get to the third. The second thing is it's highly secure, and it's very, very difficult to tamper with the content in any block. This is very, very important. It's highly secure because it's very, very difficult to tamper with the content of a block. So, whenever you want to change something, remember that the data is tied to the ID, it's the identifier. Whenever you try to tamper with it, the data is going to change, and then the ID changes, and then that would corrupt each of the previous, all of the previous blocks, right? If one changes, because they're all connected, the ID of the previous one would change as well, and then you have something that is invalid. Is it clear? It's clear, right? So they're all, because of that interconnectedness, it's very, very difficult to tamper with a block. So there's this concept about blockchain whereby you would think, okay, computers are very fast now. If I can change one block and I have a super fast computer, I can also change all of the other blocks without anybody knowing, right? Since I have a very super fast computer. So the beauty is that when a block needs to be created, there's a delay in the network. There's a delay. So it takes around 10 minutes. So I'm sure everybody has heard of Bitcoin. If you think blockchain, you just hear of Bitcoin. So Bitcoin has got like hundreds of thousands of these blocks. So imagine if it's going to take 10 minutes for you to create a new block, if you're going to have to run through all of the hundreds of thousands of blocks, I think it's going to take you at least or over 10 years to be able to change the content of any of the blocks. So it's pretty much tamper-proof. You can't tamper with it. It's very, very difficult for you to tamper with. So I'm sure some ideas are springing up, some of our minds. So if at all a change needs to be made, so Muhammad Umar was in primary 1, now he's in primary 2. You can't go back and change the first block. What you have to do is create a new block, right? You create a new block that says now he's in primary 2. So there is no, going back. We have it on record that he was in primary 2 at this particular date, and now, he was in primary 1 at this particular date, now he's in primary 2 at another date. So the third thing about blockchain, I hope everybody's following. Yes? Okay, thank you. The third thing about blockchain is it's designed to be distributed or decentralized. Are these big words? So basically what it means is, think of how we do things. If you want to send money, Taj Bank to Taj Bank, there's an entity in the middle, right? Which is Taj Bank. There's Mr. Muhammad, Mr. Ibrahim. Mr. Muhammad trying to send money to Mr. Ibrahim, but there's Taj Bank in the middle. So there's a central authority that decides, that comes into the transaction. The same thing, if you think of banking, there's always a central authority that regulates everything that happens. If you think of the ownership of lands, there's the ministry in Abuja, there's the governor's office in states that regulates and issues these CFOs. So think of a scenario where Mr. Muhammad needs to send money to Mr. Ibrahim, right? But Mr. Muhammad can send that money to Ibrahim directly without anybody in the middle, without a bank in the middle. Does it make sense? It doesn't make sense. Okay, the reason why that is possible is because both of them are on the blockchain network. So the trust is taken away from that central authority and put on the network. And remember that this network comprises of different members. Each and every single one of us can be a member of the network. So all we have to do is, once we all see that Mr. Muhammad is trying to send money to Mr. Ibrahim, then we as members of the network, as in our computers, approve of that, and the money is sent directly, quickly, like in seconds. So you don't have one central authority or a central person that is going to decide on both of their fees. That trust is taken away and put in the hands of the members of the network and put in the hands of the people. Is that clear? Is that clear? Okay. So, when you think of the applications of blockchain, immediately, I know everybody has heard of Bitcoin. So, there was some guy who had this crazy idea, who knows if it was a guy or a girl or a group of people, it's really unknown, but he had this idea that how do we remove central monopoly? How do we remove that central authority in our decision making in all of what we do? If you think of everything we do, as I said, there is a central authority that makes those kinds of decisions, that makes a decision. There's somebody in the middle dictating. And a lot of times, or sometimes, they can be misused. Inna nafsa la'amaratun bisu, right? The soul clinges towards wrongdoing. So, if you think of finance or sending money, I want to send money to the US or Malaysia. If you use the bank, how long does it take? How long? 3 days at least, right? At least it's going to take 3 days. And then it's going to cost you money, right? It's going to cost you money. You're going to have to pay charges. The banks make something out of that transaction. So, what if I can send that money to somebody in the United States immediately, like in seconds, because we have a trusted network or blockchain and everybody approves, everybody is known, there is transparency. I can send that money over to the person in the US and he receives it in seconds. Is this something good or bad? Something very good. So, blockchain can't just be applied to finance. It's not just something or a technology that you apply to finance. So think of anything whereby there is a middleman or a central authority. Healthcare, for example. Let's use Nigeria, NHIS, HMOs, hospitals. So I go to the hospital, I need service. The desk officer says, I give him my HMO ID, my NHIS ID or whatever, and then he calls the HMO, right? He has to call them and confirm. And then they have to also check whether they have, subhanAllah. They also have to check whether there is money in the hospital. And then if they call the HMO, if they can't reach the HMO, what happens? Your health service is being delayed. Your medical service is being delayed. So think of a way where we can kick out the HMO, eliminate them. And then I have a wallet. The federal government wants to send me health insurance or intervention for healthcare, and that completely, those funds come directly to my wallet, and they can see that, yeah, this person is registered, and the person has the funding from the federal government. So is this going to solve a huge problem or not? Just 2 weeks ago or so, somebody told me his wife passed away. And then he's a non-Muslim, but he said, of course, he knows when it's time, but this happened because of the negligence of the hospital. So a lot of times we have these cases. So this is just healthcare. Think of anything that requires a special kind of database where anything that goes in there, remember, it's very, very hard, almost impossible to tamper with, almost impossible to change. Think of services from government. If you need government to render you service, somebody was processing a government ID, and since July, they told him, your file is missing. We hear that a lot, right? The file is missing. Imagine if these documents are on a blockchain and you can't change them. Because if you change them, remember, you're adding a new block. So everybody's going to know. If you want to hide a file, it's now written and public on the blockchain that Mr. X has hidden the file. Nobody would want that, right? So imagine how processes would be. Take, for example, halal industry. We need to eat healthy, right? So imagine if I have a product, I can just scan a QR code and immediately I can see a full record of every single thing that has happened to that animal. Every single thing that the animal ate, every single thing that, all of the medical records, did it have issues, and so on. So the opportunities are endless. As I said, think of anything that requires the storage of data in a way that cannot be tampered with. So another example is financial inclusion. Yi da kowa yanda ake faɗa ko financial inclusion. Not long ago, COVID came, and we all saw what happened. Some countries were already prepared. You're sitting down at your house, you can receive an alert, credit alert, not any kind of alert, credit alert, right? Credit alert of an intervention from the government. Likewise, when you come to African countries, then you would see that we face a lot of challenges because we didn't prepare. And then, because there are so many middlemen in the value chain, what is meant to get to the citizen gets stuck somewhere. I hope everybody can connect, right? When palliatives were being shared, there were middlemen where those things got stuck. So imagine if there was a way that we can track from the very moment the federal government purchases those palliatives, and then we can track where each and every single palliative is. All of those things are registered on a blockchain. So what does that do for you as a citizen? It empowers you. Because you can see that what is meant to reach you is at this particular place. It's at this particular place. Remember, it's a special database that is really, really difficult to tamper with. So the opportunities and the applications are really endless. So think of, as I said, number one, a special database. Anything that enters that database is really difficult to change, almost impossible. And at the same time, you have a system that is decentralized. You don't have somebody in the middle who is going to oppress. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Ya ibadi, inni haramtu dhulm ala nafsi, right? O my servants, I have prohibited oppression on myself. It's very unbefitting for the human then to oppress. So blockchain solves that for you. Is this barakah or not? Have you followed? Is this barakah or not? It is. So it's not just good, it is barakah. We take, for example, countries like Dubai. There's a state called Delaware in the US. They've taken all of the paperwork that you have in all of these federal government agencies, and then all of that is now running on a blockchain. All of that has been automated, it now runs on the blockchain. So whatever is registered, you can't change history. So imagine if we had that in Nigeria, what's going to happen? Everybody's going to sit up, right? Everybody would sit up. So, as I said, the applications are endless. Think of voting, for example. Imagine if you could vote and it's publicly known this person has voted for this person. You're not going to have cases, this party is taking the other to the Supreme Court, right? Because there is now trust in the network. You've taken that trust away from a central authority and placed it on a network whereby everybody is a member of that network. There is no single person making the decision. There is no single person deciding this is what it's going to be and this is what it's not going to be. So applications are endless of blockchain technology. So I hope if I ask if you could describe blockchain, in very simple terms, you can. Just remember that block, you have the data, you have an ID for that block, and the ID of the previous block. So, the advent of blockchain and this whole idea of storing something in a database or having that unique ID that can be tampered with, and also the whole idea of decentralization, everybody giving a portion of the power. The power is not central to one person who decides. Everybody is giving a portion of that power. So that has brought about a lot of changes in technology. That's brought about a lot of changes in the internet itself. So that is really what Web3 is. It's bringing on that new and reliable system of trust, or new and reliable internet of trust. So when you hear Web3, 3 means the third version. There is 1, there is 2, and there is 3. 1 came about in the 1980s, where you had these very old-looking web pages, and most of what they showed was static. You just have text, and then rarely do you have images. Rarely is a person's data even collected. Right? This is the first version of the web. Now after that, you had the second version, and that was when you had all of these web services. You had the idea of you as a customer, as a user, submitting your data. When you go to Facebook or Twitter, you're submitting your name, you're submitting your email address, you're submitting your date of birth, you're giving them lots of data. There's a saying that Google knows you, Google knows you, because they know your whereabouts. They know a lot of things about you. They know what you search. They know the most important things about you. So there were lots of service providers in the second version of the web that took advantage of this. You submit your data to Facebook. What do they do with the data? They use it to make money. Did you know that? Let me give you an example. You go to Facebook, you've submitted your name, you've submitted your picture, you've submitted your interests. You submitted that you're a person who loves football, you're a person, your team is FC Barcelona or whatever. You submitted that, mashallah, Sheikh Mahir Mu'akkali is your best sheikh or best reciter. You've submitted all of these things. And each time you see a post, what do you like? You like what you like, actually, what comes out within from your heart. That's what you like. So Facebook has all of this data. And what do they now do? What they do is they would get companies that they would advertise for on their behalf. So if a company X, where you have billions of people on Facebook, and then they want to advertise a particular product, and this product is targeted towards young people. So from that portal, Facebook can target people that are aged 20 to 25, for example. You can target, I want to advertise this product to only people in Abuja. And then Facebook charges that company, and they make money out of it. Is it clear? Is it clear how they make money? Now, who gave them the data? You, right? You've given them something, they've made money out of it, and they've left you with nothing. Right? So Web3 reverses that. Web3 is all about your participation and your ownership in the new web. So think of this. You've taken the picture of, mashallah, the sunset. Somebody can just go download that and they can sell it. Or let's use this example, Getty Images. Anybody heard of Getty Images? It's a website, a famous website. You can find all sorts of images on there. You're looking for background pictures and so on. Pictures of landscapes, pictures of technology and so on. So you've submitted your image to Getty Images. What Getty Images does is they would sell to subscribers who would then use the image that you put out there to make money for themselves. But now what we're saying is, because your presence is there on the web, and now the web is transitioning to become shared. The power is now shared, it's decentralized. So you uploaded the image, so you should also make money out of it. That's what Web3 is. That you, the customer, should also be part of it. And the revenue shouldn't just be for those service providers, the revenue should also be shared with you. Is it clear? It's clear, right? So all of the data that you're giving out to these big companies, you also get paid for giving them that data. You get paid for your presence and ownership on the internet. That's what Web3 is. Is this good or bad? Very good. And remember that you're not getting paid in Naira, you're getting paid in global currency, right? So this is what Web3 is in essence. I've just tried to give a very simple explanation of blockchain, a very simple explanation of Web3. Perhaps we would have to come and give all of the technical jargon at some other time. But I hope everybody can now give a simple explanation of what blockchain is, what it promises. You've got this special database, whatever goes in there cannot be changed. It's really difficult to change it. So if we apply that to the way we deal in Africa, don't you think that that problem of a lack of transparency, that problem of lack of keeping good records is going to be solved? It's all going to be solved, right? It's going to be solved. So this is really a very simple explanation of what blockchain is, what Web3 promises. And I'd like to, call on myself and each and every single one of us to really embrace it. We don't just, or we shouldn't just, as I mentioned in the introduction, cater for the knowledge that connects us to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or knowledge that teaches us how to worship, but knowledge that is beneficial, that would make us real khulafa on the earth, that would make us to really protect our earth, protect our processes and improve them. So that little young man, who's 10 years old, this is the time. We've transitioned, this is no longer the time where you say, I want to be a doctor, or I want to be a pilot. The world has changed. It's all about, I want to learn this skill. I want to learn that skill. That is really what the world is now. So let's embrace this and try to get our hands dirty. If you can get your hands dirty and hands-on, there are so many resources, probably after the lecture I can share, inshallah. And if you just go and search on the internet, you would find lots of resources to get your hands dirty. The young ones, the whole, get them to understand this is what blockchain is, this is what Web3 is, this is the potential, and that they should embrace it. And this is also for the older ones as well. If you're working in government, if you're working in the private sector, this is a time for you to be an entrepreneur. You should innovate your internal services. If there's a challenge that we're facing, whereby, I need to repetitively submit the same records over and over again because they aren't kept properly, then this is a way to clean it up. Blockchain gives us that transparency, it gives us that neatness, it gives us that ease of dealing with each other, ease in having transactions, ease in transferring ownership of anything, whether it be a car, whether it be, imagine if you buy a car and then you can literally see that this car was owned by this person at this point in time, it was owned by this person at this point in time. Imagine if somebody steals it, but he can't prove that he's the owner. You would see the trace that the last person who owned this car isn't this person. And then you would know that I shouldn't get into this transaction, and you are saved. Now, is it clear? It's clear, right? So this is really what blockchain is, this is what Web3 is. Wanted to really give a very simple understanding, that inshallah ta'ala everyone is going to understand. So lastly, I'd just like to call on each and every single one of us that whenever we're doing these things, remember that in Islam, you can make your amal into your ibadah. What does that mean? You can have two people sleeping. Mr. A is being rewarded for his sleep. Mr. B isn't. Is that true? Yes, that's true. Mr. A is sleeping because his intention is, I want to rest because I need to wake up for Qiyam al-Layl. I want to rest so that I can have more energy to serve the community. I want to rest so that I can have energy to do good. Mr. B is just tired and he just wants to sleep. No intention. So he doesn't get rewarded. So whenever you're embracing these technologies, always, have it at the back of your mind that I'm doing this for Islam, I just met one of my lecturers recently, and what he said was, I can leave where I am and earn a lot more in, the industry and several other places. But he said, I'm staying where I am because in this field of mine, Islam needs representation. So let's do these things with the right intention that we want to really represent Islam and we want to fix and improve all of our processes, inshallah ta'ala. I can see that it's time for that. Okay, Muaddin is not here. Okay, he's here. He's making nafilah. So هذا هو ما عندي وبالله التوفيق صلى الله وسلم على نبينا محمد. So I can see a number of questions here. So I think these questions are coming from somebody who's very technical. Okay, there's a question, if one wanted to study in depth what blockchain is, what resources would they need? So there are several resources. You can go to dummies.com. Dummies.com. Has anybody seen any of these books? They explain finance for dummies. They explain economics for dummies. There are lots of these books. So just go to dummies.com, D-U-M-M-I-E-S, and you're going to find lots of content on blockchain. You just do a search on blockchain, you will find content. You can always go on YouTube, you can always go on any of these e-learning platforms, Udemy, Coursera, and you can learn a lot about it. Just do a simple research and you learn a lot about blockchain. Wow. Do you have any lecture on Hausa about blockchain? I don't. I think that's going to be a big challenge for me. But inshallah, whoever asks this question, just meet me at the end of the lecture. And inshallah, there's some resources that I can share with you of some people who have explained in detail what blockchain really is. What? And what? And what, sir? So inshallah, we try to make it very simple to understand, very little technicalities. Perhaps we will have another session or workshop to explain more in detail, maybe even workshops to really get hands-on to see how these things really work. And ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to ease all of our affairs. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, alas, detainer. Okay, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ease all of our affairs. And sallallahu wa sallam ala nabiyyina Muhammad.